The Varaxian scout ship hovered silently in the darkness of space, its cloaking technology making it nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. Inside the vessel, senior observer Zorthax peered through the viewing screen at the human military ship that had caught his attention. The metallic gray hull of the USS Defiant reflected the distant sunlight as it patrolled the edge of human territory. "Fascinating creatures," Zorthax murmured, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he adjusted the magnification. After 50 cycles of distant observation, High Command finally approves direct contact. His assistant, Junior Observer Clea, nervously flexed her tentacle-like appendages. "Is it wise to approach their military vessel first?" The diplomatic council suggested civilian contact. "The council does not understand," Zorthax replied, his skin shifting to a deeper blue shade, indicating his focus. "To understand humans, we must understand their power structure. Their military reveals more than their diplomats ever would." The order was given and the Varaxian vessel decloaked, broadcasting universal peace signals. The human ship responded with surprising calm. Within hours, against all protocol predictions, Zorthax found himself and a small delegation aboard the USS Defiant, greeted by a reception of human officers in crisp uniforms, adorned with various symbols and colors. Captain Ryan Hayes stepped forward, extending his hand in the human custom they had studied. "Welcome aboard the Defiant. I'm Captain Hayes. This is my first officer, Commander Lisa Johnson, and our diplomatic attaché, Lieutenant Greg Peters." Zorthax carefully mimicked the greeting, his specialized translation device converting his harmonic speech to English. "We are honored by your welcome. I am Senior Observer Zorthax of the Varaxian Exploration Collective." The humans led them through long corridors where crew members moved with purpose. Zorthax noted how the humans would stop and perform a curious gesture, raising their hand to their forehead whenever Captain Hayes passed. His recording implant captured every interaction as they made their way to what the humans called the conference room. "Our xenolinguistic AI is already cataloging their hierarchical indicators," Clea whispered in their native tongue. "The symbols on their shoulders and chests denote rank." Zorthax nodded. The system seemed straightforward. Admiral above captain, captain above commander, commander above lieutenant, and various non-commissioned ranks below. The humans used both visual markers and verbal acknowledgments to reinforce this structure. It was efficient, if primitive, compared to the Varaxians' biochemical status indicators. During the formal meeting, Zorthax requested permission to observe ship operations as part of the cultural exchange. Captain Hayes agreed, assigning Lieutenant Peters to serve as guide. As they toured the vessel, the Varaxians quickly confirmed their understanding of the command structure. When an admiral appeared on a communication screen, even Captain Hayes showed deference. When Commander Johnson gave orders, junior officers responded immediately. Everything made sense until they reached what humans called sick bay. A man in a different uniform, white coat over blue, was examining a crew member. Lieutenant Peters introduced him. "This is Lieutenant Commander Alan White, our Chief Medical Officer." The man looked up briefly. "Everyone just calls me Doc. Welcome aboard." He returned to his work without ceremony. Zorthax noted the rank, Lieutenant Commander, which placed this human below several others they had met. Yet something seemed different about the crew's behavior. The subtle body language, the tone of voice, all suggested something their AI couldn't quite classify. Their observations were interrupted when an alarm blared. A voice announced, "Senior officers to the bridge." As they rushed back toward the command center, they passed a burly human with stripes on his sleeve who was scheduled for something called a physical. The large human looked genuinely afraid. "Don't worry, Sergeant Garcia," Lieutenant Peters said with a smile. "Doc's probably too busy now. Your physical will have to wait." The relief on the sergeant's face was unmistakable. "Thank God," he muttered. "Doc threatened to check my cholesterol this time." Later, back in the conference room, Zorthax witnessed something that defied his understanding of the human rank structure. Captain Hayes was discussing deployment plans when the door opened and Doc entered. "Captain, I need to start crew physicals. This week," was all he said. Without hesitation, Hayes replied, "Of course, Doc, I'll reschedule the mission briefings." Zorthax's recording implant flagged the interaction as anomalous. How could a lower-ranking officer cause the captain to alter plans with such a simple statement? What power did this Doc truly hold? The Varaxian made a note in his observation. How is a human military hierarchy contains unexplained variables? The designation Doc requires further study. For the next 7 days, Zorthax and Clea continued their observation of the human military vessel. They followed Lieutenant Peters through different sections of the ship, carefully recording the interactions between crew members of various ranks. Their small data devices hummed constantly, analyzing patterns of behavior and speech. "Our initial assessment was correct," Clea said as they reviewed their findings in their assigned guest quarters. "The rank structure is clear. Higher ranks give orders, lower ranks obey." Zorthax's skin rippled with blue patches indicating disagreement. Except for the anomaly, the one they called Doc. His behavior does not match his rank. The Varaxians had witnessed several more puzzling incidents involving the ship's medical officer. Despite being a lieutenant commander, a middle rank in the human hierarchy, Doc seemed to operate outside the normal chain of command. Earlier that day, they had observed Admiral Samantha Reeves visiting the ship. The entire crew stood at attention as she boarded. Captain Hayes escorted her with the highest formality. Even the way humans spoke changed in her presence. Short, direct phrases they called "ma'am" and "yes, Admiral." Yet during the ship tour, when they entered the medical bay, something shifted. Doc barely looked up from his work, offering a simple nod to the Admiral. "Good to see you, Sam," Doc said, using the Admiral's personal name. "Still getting those headaches?" The Admiral's formal posture relaxed immediately. "They're better since I started those pills you recommended. Not enough. Your blood pressure is still elevated. I'm doubling your rest periods to 8 hours minimum." What happened next stunned the alien observers. Admiral Reeves, the highest-ranking human they had met, nodded and said, "I'll adjust my schedule." As they left the medical bay, Clea whispered, "Did the lower-ranking human just give an order to the Admiral?" "And she accepted it," Zorthax confirmed, his recording implant working overtime to capture the interaction. Now, alone in their quarters, the Varaxians struggled to understand what they had seen. "Perhaps he has secret political power?" Clea suggested. "No," Zorthax said. "The humans have been transparent about their command structure. This is something different." Their confusion deepened when they witnessed the interaction between Doc and the large human called Sergeant Pete Garcia. The sergeant was physically imposing, taller and more muscular than most crew members. His role involved security, and other humans clearly respected and even feared him. Yet when Doc finally caught him for his postponed physical, the sergeant became docile, almost childlike in his nervousness. "I don't need this, Doc," the sergeant protested weakly as he sat on the examination table. Doc merely raised an eyebrow. "Last time you said that, I found your blood pressure high enough to blow a hole in the hull. Now sit still while I check your arteries." The sergeant complied instantly, his face showing more fear than when he had faced an aggressive alien species during a security drill the previous day. Later, they observed Doc approach Captain Hayes in the dining area. "Captain, you're eating that burger again. That's 3 this week." The captain of the entire vessel looked guilty, like a small child caught misbehaving. "It's just one more, Doc." "Your cholesterol disagrees. Switch to the salad, or I'll have to schedule you for additional tests." The captain immediately put down the burger and ordered the plant-based meal instead. Zorthax recorded all these interactions in his daily report to the Varaxian High Command. The human military rank structure contains an unexplained role designated as Doc. This individual, while technically outranked by many officers, appears to hold special authority that transcends the normal hierarchy. This authority seems to be related to something humans call health and medical necessity. That night, as the ship's lights dimmed to simulate night cycle, Zorthax stared at the ceiling of his quarters. His species required little sleep, which gave him ample time to think. What power does this Doc truly hold, he wondered. And why do even the strongest, highest-ranking humans yield to his quiet suggestions? He made a new note in his personal log. The human concept of Doc may be key to understanding their true power structure. Further research is essential. He did not yet realize how correct his instinct was, or how dramatically the true nature of Doc would soon be revealed. The diplomatic meeting between the Varaxians and humans was proceeding smoothly in the USS Defiant's main conference room. Captain Hayes sat at the head of the table with Admiral Reeves beside him. Zorthax and 3 other Varaxian representatives occupied one side, while human officers filled the other. Doc sat quietly in the corner, reviewing data on a small screen. "Our species looks forward to sharing technological advances," Zorthax said, his translator converting his harmonic speech perfectly. "Especially in the fields of deep space navigation and energy production." Admiral Reeves nodded with a smile. "Earth Alliance is particularly interested in your cloaking technology. Perhaps we could discuss—" A violent explosion cut off her words. The ship rocked sideways, throwing several people from their chairs. Warning alarms blared as red lights flashed throughout the room. "Report," Captain Hayes shouted into his communication device as he regained his footing. A panicked voice responded through the speakers. "Engineering section hit, sir. Some kind of malfunction in the experimental drive core. Multiple casualties, fire on deck 5 and 6. Zorthax watched in fascination as the humans transformed instantly from diplomatic participants to crisis responders. The calm, ordered structure they had observed for days shifted to an emergency configuration. Most interesting was the change in Doc. The quiet medical officer stood up, his demeanor completely altered. His voice cut through the chaos with unexpected authority. "Medical Emergency Protocol Alpha. I need all decks cleared between here and sickbay for casualty evacuation," he said, not asking, but stating. Captain Hayes immediately responded. "Security, clear those decks now." Doc turned to Admiral Reeves. "Admiral, I need the comm channel switched to medical emergency band." Without hesitation, the highest-ranking human in the room complied, adjusting controls on the wall unit. "Medical band open, Doc." Zorthax and Clea exchanged surprised glances. The change in the human's behavior was dramatic. The chain of command seemed to have instantly reorganized around Doc. The medical officer continued issuing directives as they moved quickly through the corridors. "Captain, I need 3 security teams for triage and transport. Admiral, contact medical ships in the sector. We may need additional support." Both high-ranking officers immediately began carrying out these instructions without question. When they reached the damage section, the scene was chaotic. Injured humans lay everywhere amid smoke and debris. Colonel Steve Phillips and his security team were trying to maintain order, but they stood directly in the path to the wounded. "Colonel, your men are in my way," Doc said quietly. The colonel, who Zorthax had observed giving stern commands to dozens of subordinates, instantly ordered his team to move. "Clear a path for Doc now." What followed was even more remarkable to the alien observers. Doc moved through the injured crew with incredible speed and focus. He touched necks, checked eyes, and placed colored tags on each person. His hands moved with precision as he applied emergency treatments to the most severely wounded. Red tags first. Move them to sickbay immediately. Yellow tags. Set up a triage point in the secondary hall. His voice remained calm but carried absolute authority. 2 Varaxian crew members who had been visiting engineering were among the injured. Doc moved to them without hesitation, examining them with the same care he showed the humans. "Different anatomy, similar trauma response," he muttered, adapting his treatment techniques. "Get these 2 on respiratory support. Their lung equivalent is compromised." Zorthax watched as Doc saved the lives of his people, applying emergency medical techniques perfectly adapted to Varaxian physiology, something that should have been impossible given the limited prior contact between their species. For hours, Doc worked tirelessly, moving between the injured, performing emergency surgeries, and coordinating the medical response. Not once did anyone question his authority. Not the captain, not the admiral, not even the Varaxian medical officers who arrived to assist. Late that night, when the crisis had finally stabilized, Zorthax found Clea in the observation room, overlooking sickbay. Below them, Doc still moved from bed to bed, checking on patients. Our understanding was incomplete, Zorthax said quietly. The term doc is not just a designation of medical knowledge. It appears to trigger some form of emergency authority transfer in crisis situations. Clea's skin had turned a pale yellow of concern. This changes our assessment of human power structure. Their medical personnel are not support staff as we assumed. They are something else. Zorthax nodded slowly. I will update our report to High Command immediately. The human military hierarchy is more complex than we realized, and this doc is far more significant than his rank suggests. 6 weeks after the incident on the USS Defiant, the Varaxian High Command gathered in their central decision chamber on the homeworld. The circular room glowed with soft blue light as 9 senior officials studied the holographic displays floating before them. Observer Zorthax's reports have been interesting, said Chief Strategist Velnog, his scaled skin shimmering with patterns that indicated deep thought. His analysis of human military structure has revealed unexpected complexities. The Strategic Assessment Director nodded, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Most fascinating is this anomaly regarding their medical personnel, these individuals designated as Doc. They appear to hold authority that transcends their formal rank. Military Commander Drestar made a dismissive gesture with his upper limbs. I believe Observer Zorthax has misinterpreted what he witnessed. No logical military structure would allow lower-ranked individuals to override command decisions. The room fell silent as the leaders considered the evidence. Finally, the Supreme Strategist spoke, her voice carrying the weight of final authority. We must make a determination based on available information. Our upcoming interactions with humans depend on an accurate understanding of their power structures. She gestured to the central display, which showed footage from the USS Defiant during the crisis. They watched again as Doc directed admirals and captains who obeyed without question. What is your conclusion? She asked the assembled leaders. Military. Commander Drestar spoke first. This must be a ceremonial role only. A temporary courtesy extended during specific medical situations but without true authority. No military would function efficiently with such confusion in the chain of command. Several others nodded in agreement. Consider the practical implications. Drestar continued. In any conflict scenario, true authority must rest with combat commanders. These Doc individuals clearly focus on injury treatment, not strategic decisions. They are support personnel, not command assets. The Supreme Strategist considered this argument. Your assessment aligns with traditional military logic. Very well. For our strategic planning purposes, we will classify human medical personnel as non-combat, non-essential personnel. The decision was recorded and transmitted throughout the Varaxian fleet. Observer Zorthax received the update while still aboard a human station near the border of their territories. He read the classification with growing concern. This is a significant misunderstanding, he told Clea. They have dismissed my observations about the importance of these Doc individuals. Clea's skin darkened with worry. Should we submit a formal objection? Before Zorthax could answer, a priority alert flashed across their communication screens. A radical faction within the Varaxian military had broken away from High Command. Led by Subcommander Vexacal, this splinter group had decided to test human military capabilities with a surprise attack on a frontier colony. The message contained their attack strategy. Primary targets are command and control assets. Secondary targets are weapon systems and communications. Non-priority targets include medical facilities and personnel, classified as non-essential to military function. Zorthax felt his body temperature drop in horror. They're going to attack a human colony while deliberately ignoring medical personnel. They don't understand what they're doing. Hours later, reports began flowing in. The radical faction had launched a precision strike against Unity Colony, a joint military-civilian outpost near the border. Their attack had successfully eliminated most of the colony's leadership and damaged key defensive systems. The Varaxian attackers reported minimal resistance after the initial strike. As per their strategy, they had carefully avoided damaging medical facilities, considering them non-essential targets. First phase successful, read the report. Human command structure decapitated. Medical facilities intact as planned, as these serve no strategic purpose. Expecting surrender communications within standard time parameters, Zorthax read these reports with growing dread. They believe they've achieved victory by eliminating the officers while sparing the medical personnel. Kleya looked confused. Isn't that the correct strategy based on High Command's assessment? No, Zorthax said quietly. It's exactly wrong. They've eliminated the humans who would have shown restraint, while leaving alive the ones who will stop at nothing to protect their patients. He turned to the communication system, desperately trying to warn the attack force. They need to withdraw immediately. They have no idea what they've done. But his warning came too late. The next report arrived with very different news. Unexpected. Resistance encountered. Human medical units have taken operational control. Request immediate reinforcement. Something is very wrong. Commander Susan Clark was finishing her rounds in the medical center of Unity Colony when the first explosions shook the building. She steadied herself against a wall as the lights flickered. The attack had come without warning, precise and devastating. Status. Report, she called to her staff, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. Nurse Jeff Baker looked up from the emergency communication console. Direct hits on command center and defensive systems. Colonel Joe Taylor and most of the senior officers were in the command meeting. He paused, swallowing hard. They're gone, Doc. Susan took a deep breath, processing this information. As chief medical officer of the colony, she had worked alongside those officers for 3 years. Now they were gone, and from the sound of the continuing explosions, the colony was under serious attack. Any communication from Earth Command? She asked. Communication arrays are down, another staff member reported. We're cut off. Susan looked around the medical center. Patients from the initial blast were already being brought in by survivors. The medical facility itself appeared untouched by the precision strikes. That's strange, she said quietly. They hit command, defenses, and communications, but deliberately avoided medical. Through the windows she could see Varaxian ships in the sky. She had treated several Varaxian diplomats during cultural exchanges and recognized their vessel designs. They don't understand, she said, more to herself than anyone else. As realization dawned, her expression hardened. They think we're non-essential. She turned to her medical team, who looked to her for guidance. Listen up. Command structure is down. Under Emergency Protocol 729, medical takes operational control in absence of command leadership. The medical staff straightened, their training kicking in. They had drilled for this scenario, though none had expected to actually implement it. Nurse Baker, activate all emergency medical personnel. Dr. Allen, begin triage protocols for incoming. Wounded. Lieutenant Kim, get me a full inventory of medical supplies that can be repurposed. Repurposed for what, Doc? Lieutenant Kim asked. Susan's voice was steady as steel. For whatever we need to protect our patients. Within an hour, the medical center had transformed. Patients were moved to secure interior rooms. Medical staff worked efficiently, treating the wounded while simultaneously preparing defensive measures. Susan studied the colony schematics, identifying vulnerabilities and advantages. Before becoming a doctor, she had served 6 years as a combat officer. Many of her medical staff had similar backgrounds, a fact the Varaxian attackers clearly didn't know. They targeted the obvious command structure but left the most dangerous humans alive, she told her assembled team. Every person in this room knows both how to save a life and exactly what it takes to end one. Outside, Varaxian forces had established control of the colony's main areas. They moved with military precision, expecting minimal resistance after eliminating the command structure. Their tactical data indicated that remaining personnel were primarily non-combatants and medical staff. They were unprepared when the first counterattack came. A Varaxian patrol disappeared near the hydroponic section. Another lost contact while securing the residential zone. The attacks were precise, using minimal force with maximum effect, exactly like surgical procedures. The Varaxian commander, confused by the unexpected resistance, sent a larger force to investigate the medical center, still operating under orders not to damage medical facilities. They approached cautiously, weapons ready. The building appeared normal from outside, with emergency lights showing staff movement inside. The doors opened as they approached. Commander Susan Clark stood there alone, wearing her white medical coat with the caduceus symbol. She looked calm and professional, exactly like the non-threat the Varaxians had classified her as. "I understand you've injured personnel," she said simply. "As a doctor, I'm obligated to offer treatment." The Varaxian patrol leader hesitated, confused by this offer. "We have minor injuries," he admitted finally. Susan nodded. "Please bring them in. I'll help them while we discuss terms." "Terms?" the patrol leader asked. "Yes," Susan said, her voice suddenly cold as space itself. "The terms of your immediate withdrawal from my colony and the patients under my care." The Varaxian laughed, a harmonic sound that cut off abruptly when he noticed Susan's unwavering gaze. "You misunderstand," he said. "We've taken this colony. Your military leadership is eliminated." Susan's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made the alien step back involuntarily. "No," she said quietly. "You misunderstand. You've only eliminated the people who would have shown you mercy." She touched the comm unit on her wrist. "This is Doc. Begin Operation Scalpel." Throughout the colony, the coordinated counterattack began, led by medical personnel who knew exactly what they were doing. The Varaxians were about to learn why humans were so afraid of making Doc angry. 2 days after the attack on Unity Colony, Zorthak stood nervously before the Varaxian High Command. The emergency meeting had been called to understand how their military operation had failed so dramatically. "Explain again what happened," the Supreme Strategist demanded, her skin flashing patterns of distress and confusion. Zorthax gestured to the data displays around them. The attack initially succeeded as planned. The human command structure was eliminated. Defensive systems were disabled. But then everything changed when the colony's medical personnel took control. Military Commander Drezitar slammed his upper limbs on the table in frustration. How could medical staff mount an effective military response? It defies basic military doctrine. "That is precisely what we misunderstood," Zorthax replied. "Human military doctors are not just healers. I've compiled the data on Commander Susan Clark, the colony's chief medical officer who led the counteroffensive." He displayed her personnel file, which had been shared during previous diplomatic exchanges. Before her medical training, she served 6 years in frontline combat operations. Many human military doctors follow this pattern. They are warriors before they are healers. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Show us what happened," the Supreme Strategist ordered. Zorthax activated the recorded transmissions from the failed attack force. The assembled leaders watched with growing horror as the events unfolded. The recordings showed how the medical staff had used their knowledge of anatomy against the attackers. They deployed precisely targeted nerve agents that incapacitated Varaxian troops without killing them. They used sound frequencies that disrupted Varaxian inner ear balance. Most disturbing were the surgical strike teams, medical personnel, who moved with military precision, neutralizing threats with minimal force. "Observe how they target nerve clusters and pressure points," Zorthax pointed out. "They use their healing knowledge to temporarily disable, rather than kill." In one recording, a human medic approached captured Varaxian soldiers, treating their injuries with the same care given to human patients. The same medic had minutes earlier used a medical dart gun to precisely hit the nerve cluster that paralyzed the Varaxian patrol. "This is the most significant finding," Zorthax said, highlighting Commander Susan Clark's actions. She coordinated the entire defensive operation, while simultaneously establishing a field hospital that treated wounded from both sides. The recording showed Clark moving between tactical operations and emergency surgeries, her white coat now stained with both human and Varaxian blood. Her hands moved with identical precision, whether she was stabilizing a wound or disabling an attacker. "Their medical training gives them intimate knowledge of how bodies work," Zorthax explained. They know precisely where to apply pressure to heal or to harm. Military Commander Drestar's skin had paled to a sickly yellow. Why did we never see this potential threat? Because we do not combine these roles in our culture, Zorthax replied. Our warriors and healers follow separate paths. Humans do not make this distinction. Their military doctors must master both disciplines. He displayed another piece of evidence: intercepted communications between human soldiers during the counterattack. Listen to how they speak about their medical. Officer, he instructed. The recording played, Doc's on the warpath. Stay out of her way. Another voice. God help those aliens, they made Doc angry. A third. Better to face 100 soldiers than one angry Doc. The Supreme Strategist's expression was grave. We fundamentally misunderstood their military structure. There's more, Zorthax continued. I discovered something called the Hippocratic Oath that these doctors take. It binds them to preserve life and do no harm. But when that oath is violated, when their patients are threatened, it transforms their healing focus into precisely targeted retribution. He displayed the final outcome statistics. The Varaxian attack force had been completely neutralized within 6 hours. Remarkably, the casualty rate among the attackers was less than 10%. The rest had been captured using non-lethal methods that a military force would never have employed. This is the true nature of human military structure, Zorthax concluded. Their healers are also their most dangerous potential warriors. The term Doc doesn't designate a non-combatant. It identifies someone with both the knowledge to save lives and the ability to end them, someone who chooses healing but is fully capable of destruction when necessary. The Supreme Strategist stared at the image of Commander Susan Clark tending to a wounded Varaxian soldier. We must immediately revise our understanding of human military potential, and we must make peace with this colony before more damage is done. 3 months after the attack on Unity Colony, a formal cultural exchange program was established between humans and Varaxians. The meeting room on the neutral space station was filled with representatives from both species. Commander Susan Clark, still serving as the colony's chief medical officer, had been specifically requested to lead the human delegation. Susan stood before the gathered aliens, her white medical coat a stark contrast to the military uniforms worn by her staff. The Varaxians watched her with a mixture of respect and apprehension. We are here today to prevent future misunderstandings, Susan began. My role is to explain human medical protocols within our military structure. Zorthax, now promoted to Senior Cultural Liaison, translated her words for any Varaxians whose translators were not functioning properly. The Supreme Strategist herself had come to witness this exchange. In human military service, medical personnel follow a unique path, Susan continued. Many of us begin as combat officers before entering medical training. I served 6 years in active combat zones before becoming a doctor. She displayed images of human medical training facilities. The Varaxians watched with fascination as human doctors practiced both surgical techniques and combat maneuvers. Our training requires mastery of 2 seemingly opposite skills, Susan explained. We must know how to heal bodies under the worst conditions, but we must also know how to function in combat situations. This dual training is what you misunderstood during your attack. The Varaxian military commander shifted uncomfortably. Our species separates these functions. Warriors fight, healers heal. The combination seems contradictory. Susan nodded. It can appear that way. But in human history, battlefield medicine has always required both abilities. A combat medic who cannot defend their patients will fail in their primary mission. She showed them historical images, ancient battlefield physicians, World War II medics running through gunfire to reach wounded soldiers, modern combat doctors performing surgery in desert field hospitals while under attack. This is why military medical personnel are given special authority, Susan continued. When matters of health and safety are concerned, even admirals must yield to our judgment. This isn't ceremonial, it's practical. A commander who ignores medical advice endangers the entire mission. The Varaxians listened intently, their skin patterns showing deep concentration. Susan could see they were struggling to reconcile these seemingly contradictory aspects of human military structure. "What about your oath?" asked a Varaxian medical officer. "We have learned of your promise to do no harm. How do you reconcile this with combat actions?" Susan's expression became serious. "That is the core of what makes medical personnel different from other warriors. Our primary mission is always to preserve life. We use force only when necessary to protect our patients." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "This actually makes us more effective in certain combat situations. We aren't interested in conquest or victory, only in neutralizing threats to those under our care. This focus can make us more dangerous than conventional soldiers." A younger Varaxian raised a limb to ask a question. "Is this why your soldiers fear making Doc angry? We intercepted communications that suggested this." Susan smiled slightly. "Yes. Military personnel know that doctors and medics see the worst of war without becoming desensitized to it. We treat the results of violence every day. We know exactly what weapons do to bodies. When we are forced to fight, we fight with that knowledge." She showed them footage from the colony's defense, medical staff using precisely targeted strikes, deploying customized chemical agents that temporarily paralyzed without causing permanent harm, treating captured attackers, alongside human wounded. "This is the paradox your attack strategy didn't account for," Susan explained. "By eliminating our conventional military leadership while sparing medical personnel, you left alive the people who could do the most damage with the least desire to do so." The Supreme Strategist spoke for the first time. "We have observed that your counterattack resulted in minimal casualties among our forces. Was this deliberate restraint?" Susan nodded. "Of course. Doctors don't seek to kill when incapacitation will suffice. Our goal was to end the threat to our patients, not to punish the attackers." The alien leader's skin rippled with patterns of respect. "This principle is worthy of study." As the session concluded, Zorthax approached Susan privately. "Your explanation helps, but I sense there is something deeper that we still don't fully grasp about human doctors in military service." Susan considered this for a moment. "Perhaps it's this. Good soldiers are trained to take lives when necessary. Good doctors are trained to save lives at any cost. When you combine these in one person, you create someone who understands precisely the value of what they protect." 1 year after the Unity Colony incident, Zorthax stood before a crowded lecture hall on the Varaxian homeworld. The audience consisted of military strategists, cultural liaisons, and spacefaring crew members, all personnel who might encounter humans in the future. His comprehensive study on human military structure had become required reading throughout the Varaxian fleet. "Today marks the official publication of my final analysis," Zorthax announced, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. His skin glowed with the blue patterns of academic pride. "After extensive research and direct observation, I believe we now understand the true nature of human military effectiveness." Holographic displays activated around the room, showing various human military personnel in their respective roles. The image of Commander Susan Clark in her medical coat featured prominently. "Our initial assumptions about human military structure were fundamentally flawed," Zorthax continued. "We believed their effectiveness stemmed from technology or numerical advantage. We were wrong. Their true strength lies in their unique specialization system." He highlighted different human military roles: engineers, communications specialists, logistics officers, each with distinct training but capable of functioning outside their specialty when needed. "But no role better exemplifies this paradox than their healers," he said, enlarging the image of military medical personnel. "These individuals combine the deepest knowledge of life preservation with the capacity for precise lethality when necessary." The audience watched footage from the Unity Colony incident, where medical staff had neutralized an attack force 3 times their size, with minimal casualties on either side. The human designation Doc does not indicate weakness or non-combatant status as we initially believed, Zorthax explained. Rather, it signifies an individual who has mastered both creation and destruction, mercy and judgment. A young military officer raised a limb to ask a question. "Why do humans themselves seem to fear these medical personnel?" "Our intelligence, indicates their own soldiers speak of Doc with trepidation. Zorthax nodded, having anticipated this question. Humans fear their doctors for several interconnected reasons. First, medical personnel see humans at their most vulnerable. Second, they can inflict necessary pain to promote healing, something uniquely unsettling. Third, and most importantly, they combine intimate knowledge of biology with the authority to use that knowledge. He displayed new footage, a large human soldier nervously submitting to a medical examination, a ship captain immediately obeying a doctor's dietary restrictions. This fear is actually respect, Zorthax continued. Humans recognize that their medical personnel have overcome a psychological barrier that most warriors never face. They have seen the worst outcomes of violence and chosen to heal despite this knowledge. The Supreme Strategist, sitting in the front row, spoke up. Your conclusions have already changed our military doctrine regarding human encounters. What final wisdom would you share with this gathering? Zorthax considered the question carefully. His time among humans had transformed his understanding of their species. In human military culture, no one is more respected or more feared than the quiet, unassuming figure they call Doc, he said finally. This seeming contradiction reveals something profound about humans themselves. They respect power, yes, but they reserve their highest respect for those who use power with restraint and purpose. He showed a final image. Commander Susan Clark, treating a wounded Varaxian soldier with the same care she showed humans. They reserve their harshest judgment for those who harm the vulnerable under their protection, Zorthax continued. When a human soldier says Doc is coming, it could herald either your salvation or your doom. The difference lies entirely in your actions toward those under Doc's care. The audience fell silent, absorbing this insight. My conclusion is simple, Zorthax said. If you must face humans in conflict, pray you never give them cause to unleash their healers upon you. But if you extend your hand in peace, you will find no better friend or more skilled ally than those same individuals they call Doc. In the years that followed, this understanding formed the foundation of human-Varaxian relations. Military. Exchanges now included medical personnel from both species. Human combat medics taught Varaxian healers field techniques, while Varaxian medical specialists shared their advanced biological knowledge. The clearest sign of this new respect came when Varaxian warriors began using a new term for their most trusted battlefield healers borrowed directly from human language, a term that signified both healing skill and protective ferocity. They called them Doc.